Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder. And last time, Philip Sheridan snatched victory from the jaws of defeat at the Battle of Cedar Creek. Now we follow Sheridan as he chases Robert E. Lee's army to Appomattox. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. After defeating Jubal early at the Battle of Cedar Creek, that Confederate army became less of a concern to Philip Sheridan, who began to expand his reach and attack other points. He turned his attention to Loudoun County, Virginia, known as Mosby's Confederacy because of the partisan ranger John Singleton Mosby's control of the area. Sheridan wrote to Washington, "I will soon commence on Loudoun County, and let them know there is a God in Israel. Those who live at home, in peace and plenty, want the duello part of this war to go on. But when they have to bear their burden by loss of property and comforts, they will cry for peace." Sheridan sent his cavalry into the county with orders to make it untenable for a Confederate army to subsist in the area. The citizens had given too many meals to guerrillas to have any sympathy from Sheridan. For 4 days, Merritt's 4,000 cavalrymen desolated the countryside and filled the sky with black smoke. They spared the Unionist Quakers when they could, but no one else, slogging through slush, sleet, and snow to carry out their grim task. When the mission ended, Merritt's men had driven off or destroyed 3,000 to 4,000 sheep, 5,000 to 6,000 cattle, and nearly 1,000 hogs. They seized between 500 and 700 horses. A forage depot and several hundred tons of hay were destroyed, along with barns, stables, smokehouses, and corn cribs. Losses totaled millions of dollars. Despite the destruction that Sheridan sanctioned on the Shenandoah Valley and other places in Virginia under his jurisdiction, he exhibited a soft side as well. On Christmas Day, 1864, Sheridan requested permission for the War Department to distribute army supplies to citizens in the valley who were starving. The request was denied, but later that winter, emergency supplies were brought into Winchester for distribution. On February 27th, Sheridan set out to destroy what was left of Jubal Early's army. Robert E. Lee drained Early's command of troops to help protect Richmond and Petersburg, so all Early had left was about 1,500 infantry and around 500 cavalry. The old Confederates set up a defensive position northwest of Waynesboro to confront Sheridan. Union cavalry overran Early's left flank and scattered his forces. The Confederate army of the valley was virtually destroyed. Sheridan was determined to see the last throes of the Confederacy and went to join Ulysses S. Grant at Petersburg. As he moved through central Virginia, he wrecked the James River Canal and the Virginia Central Railroad, pressing on to the northern perimeter of Richmond, then south across the James River to where the Army of the Potomac was laying siege to the Army of Northern Virginia at Petersburg. Sheridan met with Grant, and the general-in-chief suggested that Sheridan would take the cavalry corps to meet up with William T. Sherman, who was moving through the Carolinas. Sheridan protested and insisted on staying with Grant to end the siege of Petersburg. When Sherman came to visit with Grant at City Point to discuss strategy, Sheridan became so afraid that Sherman would change Grant's mind about going to the Carolinas that Sheridan went to City Point, finding the two men still discussing strategy at midnight. Sheridan stuck up for himself and protested being sent to Sherman's army. The next morning, Sherman came to Sheridan's tent and tried again to convince Little Phil to join his army, but Sheridan was unmoved. At the very end of March, Grant proposed to Sheridan to move his cavalry corps to the far right flank of the Confederate army and threaten the last supply routes into Petersburg and Richmond. Sheridan moved his horsemen to Dinwiddie Court House in an attempt to draw the Confederates out of their entrenchments. At the town, Sheridan and his staff stayed in the hotel and tavern. There they met two women who evacuated Charleston, South Carolina, when Sherman marched to the sea and were on their way to Petersburg, but were stuck at Dinwiddie. The two ladies asked that Sheridan not fight a battle near the hotel to spare them from witnessing the carnage. The Union officers agreed to spare them from it. That night the ladies served them coffee, and the group gathered around an out-of-tune piano to sing popular songs and eat berries. The officers slept on the floor once the festivities subsided. As the rain came pouring down, making it difficult for horses, men, and wagons to travel through the Virginia landscape, Grant sent a message to Sheridan, telling him that the rains will prevent them from continuing the operation. The message horrified Sheridan, who didn't want to stop the operation. He didn't respond by letter. Instead, he wrote to Grant's headquarters at Gravelly Run. Upon arriving, Grant's staff surrounded Sheridan to hear what he had to say. He told them that it was a mistake to pull back, and that I can drive the whole cavalry force of the enemy with ease, and if an infantry force is added to my command, I can strike out for Lee's right, and either crush it or force him to so weaken his entrenched lines that our troops in front of them can break through and march into Petersburg. When an officer asked how he could obtain food for his horses, Sheridan responded, "I'll haul it out. If I have to set every man in the command to corduroy every mile of them from the railroad to Dinwiddie, I tell you I'm ready to strike out tomorrow and go to smashing things." Grant heard Sheridan's arguments and agreed to let Sheridan continue the operation. Sheridan's horsemen were on the road between Dinwiddie Courthouse and Five Forks, a major crossroads. The Confederate force sent to combat him was commanded by George Pickett. With 5 brigades of infantry, some cavalry, and artillery, Pickett began to push against Sheridan's cavalry, driving them back toward Dinwiddie. Outside of the town, Sheridan halted his men and defended the area, and prevented Pickett from pushing them any further. Sheridan initially wanted the 6th Corps to help him attack Pickett, but Grant told him it was too far away to get to him in time. The next closest corps was the 5th Corps under Gouverneur K. Warren. Warren sent 1 division ahead, but those troops were stopped by the Confederates. Nightfall brought an end to the fighting as the Confederates pulled back to Five Forks. On April 1st, Warren came to Sheridan to discuss future plans. Sheridan began to sketch out a battle plan in the dirt with his saber. The cavalry would hold the enemy in place until Warren could get onto the left flank of Pickett's line. Then both would attack and isolate the Virginians' force. Sheridan urged Warren to make haste, but Warren moved slowly. An hour after Warren left Sheridan's presence, a messenger came to Sheridan from Grant, informing him that Grant gave Sheridan full authority to relieve Warren if he deemed a 5th Corps division commander more capable in commanding the corps. 3 hours passed, but there was no firing on Warren's front. Sheridan's cavalry could possibly run out of ammunition before Warren made the attack. Sheridan rode to Warren and found his corps had only moved 2 miles in those 3 hours and were still half a mile away from where he was supposed to attack Pickett. Sheridan went up to Warren, who was drawn in the dirt. Sheridan urged him to move quicker, but Warren didn't make any effort to encourage his men and officers to increase their step. As more time passed, Sheridan made every possible appeal for promptness, dismounted from his horse, paced up and down, struck the clenched fist of one hand against the palm of the other, and fretted like a caged tiger. At 4 p.m., the 5th Corps was ready to attack. The Confederate leadership, including Pickett and the cavalry commanders, were at a shadbake, not aware of the impending disaster about to befall them. When Warren launched his attack, it overwhelmed the left flank of Pickett's line. Sheridan ordered his dismounted cavalry forward, putting added pressure on the rebels. Sheridan observed part of Warren's corps, Romaine Ayres's division, beginning to waver. Sheridan feared that the division would fall back and ruin the attack, so he charged into the group of men with his standard in one hand and told the blue troops to smash them, go at them with a will, move on at a clean jump, or you'll not catch one of them. When a gap emerged in the Union line, it was filled with the brigade of Joshua Chamberlain. Sheridan watched Chamberlain lead his men forward at the front of his troops. Sheridan declared, "By God, that's what I want to see, general officers at the front." One soldier fell to the ground in front of Sheridan, clutching his neck when a ball pierced his jugular. The shot man yelled, "I'm killed." Sheridan rode up and said, "You're not hurt a bit. Pick up your gun, man, and move right to the front." This inspired the wounded man to pick up his musket, run a dozen steps, and then fell dead from blood loss. Sheridan was at a loss as to Warren's whereabouts. It was Sheridan who rallied Ayres's division. It was Sheridan who ordered in Charles Griffin's division when a gap emerged in the Union battle line. Warren was nowhere to be found. The corps commander had followed his 3rd Division, which had gotten off course, and corrected it, getting into the rear of the Confederates. Warren sent a messenger to tell Sheridan where he was, but it was too late. Sheridan was livid. Sheridan told the messenger, "By God, sir, tell General Warren he wasn't in that fight." Shortly afterward, Sheridan told Warren he was relieved of command, and Charles Griffin would take command of the 5th Corps. Warren would later go to Sheridan's headquarters and ask him to reconsider the order. Sheridan responded, "Reconsider? Hell, I don't reconsider my determinations." Warren would fight to save his reputation for the rest of his life. The Battle of Five Forks ended in a great victory for Sheridan, completely routing Pickett's men. One man told Sheridan that he believed Sheridan exposed himself in battle more than a corps commander should. Sheridan responded, "I have never in my life taken a command into battle and had the slightest desire to come out alive unless I won." The next day, the Union Army burst through the Confederate defenses of Petersburg, sending the Army of Northern Virginia and the Confederate government fleeing from Richmond and its environs. The chase began as the rebel army moved west, attempting to locate supplies and hopefully link up with Joseph E. Johnston and the Army of Tennessee in North Carolina. Sheridan and his cavalry followed Lee's army closely and attempted to cut the Confederates off from any assistance that may be found in southern Virginia. The Union Army of the Potomac was right behind. At Jetersville, Sheridan received the news he dreaded. The Union Army commander George Meade ordered him to halt at Jetersville and await the rest of the army before pursuing. Sheridan fretted that this would waste valuable time. He didn't respond to Meade, but wrote to Grant. Grant hurried to the front and met with Sheridan at his makeshift headquarters in a log cabin in the middle of a tobacco field. The men coming into the headquarters woke Sheridan up, and the sleepy-eyed general began to lay out maps, explaining where he thought Lee was headed and where he believed his cavalry could cut Lee off. Grant agreed and had Meade countermand his order. Sheridan would march west, shadowing Lee's army and blocking him from heading south. As Lee's columns marched west, Longstreet's corps pulled away from the rest of the army, producing a sizable gap. Sheridan exploited that gap and helped to trap the corps of Richard Anderson and Richard Ewell that resulted in the Battle of Sailor's Creek. Sheridan's cavalry corps fought alongside the 6th Corps under Horatio Wright, the same corps that helped turn the tide for Sheridan at Cedar Creek. During the fight, Sheridan told his subordinates, "Never mind your flanks, go through them. They're demoralized as hell." The Confederates broke, and Sheridan and the other Union soldiers captured thousands of prisoners. Sheridan wrote to Grant that, "If the thing is pressed, I think that Lee will surrender." Grant sent the message to President Lincoln, and he telegraphed back, "Let the thing be pressed."